There is a pattern hidden in the archives of Edgar Cayce's work that almost no one talks about. A pattern that emerged slowly across years of trance sessions, like a message written in invisible ink finally becoming visible. In 1937, something began happening in Cayce's readings that had never happened with such consistency before, when souls of the recently deceased would communicate through his trance state, sometimes invited by grieving family members, sometimes appearing spontaneously with urgent messages. They began expressing a plea that surprised everyone in the room. Not "tell them I love them," not "tell them I'm at peace," but something far more unexpected. Tell them to stop. Stop what? At first, Cayce and his stenographer Gladys Davis didn't recognize the pattern. Each message seemed specific to individual circumstances. A deceased mother asking her daughter to stop something. A departed husband urging his widow to change a particular behavior. But as Cayce continued documenting these communications over the following years, a clear pattern emerged. 9 specific behaviors, 9 things that the living were doing, always with love, always with the best intentions, that the dead were desperately asking them to stop. Because these behaviors weren't helping anyone heal, they weren't honoring the dead. Instead, according to the souls themselves, speaking through Cayce's extraordinary access to the borderland between worlds, these behaviors were binding souls to the earthly plane, delaying their evolution, sometimes causing them genuine distress. In the next 40 minutes, you're going to discover all 9 of these behaviors. And if you've lost someone you love, if you're still carrying grief like a weight you can't put down, if you've been performing rituals or holding onto habits you thought were honoring their memory, this teaching may transform everything you believe about death, grief, and love itself. This isn't about doing grief wrong. There is no wrong way to feel loss, but there is a difference between what serves the departed and what serves only our own fear of losing them forever. And according to Edgar Cayce's meticulous documentation of after-death communications, that difference could determine whether someone you love remains peacefully at rest or remains trapped between worlds, waiting for your permission to move forward into the light. The souls are speaking. They have been speaking for decades through Cayce's work. The question is, are you ready to hear what they're actually saying? Before we reveal what the dead wish you'd stop doing, you need to understand how Edgar Cayce received this information in the first place, because this wasn't channeling in the theatrical sense. It wasn't seances or Ouija boards or mediumship performances. Edgar Cayce never sought communication with the deceased. He never advertised himself as a medium. His life's work centered on helping living people through medical readings, life readings, and spiritual guidance drawn from what he called the Akashic Records. But during these readings, especially during life readings where he would trace someone's soul history across multiple incarnations, something else would occasionally happen. A deceased soul would appear in his trance state, uninvited, unexpected, with urgent messages for the living. At first, this phenomenon troubled Cayce. He worried about lower astral entities attempting to deceive or manipulate. He worried about opening doors that should remain closed. But over time, he developed discernment. He learned to recognize the frequency difference between genuine souls who had successfully transitioned and confused entities still clinging to earthly plane awareness. The genuine souls, he discovered, weren't appearing to prove the afterlife or provide comfort through generic messages. They were appearing because they needed something from the living, something specific, something that the living, in their grief and love, weren't understanding. They needed to be released. Over decades of documenting these communications with scientific precision, Cayce began noticing patterns. Souls from completely different backgrounds, different belief systems, different causes of death, would express remarkably similar frustrations, about how the living were treating their absence. In one case, from 1939, a woman who had lost her husband came to Cayce desperate for contact. During the reading, her husband's soul did appear, but instead of the comforting words she hoped for, he said through Cayce's trance voice, "Tell her to stop visiting my grave every single day. Tell her I'm not there. Tell her I need her to live again." The woman was devastated. She thought her daily grave visits demonstrated faithfulness. In another case from 1941, a mother grieving her son received a message that shocked her. "Tell her to remove my ashes from the mantle. Tell her I'm not in that urn. Tell her the sight of it is keeping both of us trapped." Case after case after case. Tell him I don't need the yearly memorial service. I need him to remember me naturally, not ritually. Tell them the shrine they've made of my room is preventing me from fully releasing into the light. Tell her that her guilt is weighing on me more than any sin I committed in life. Cayce began systematically categorizing these messages. What emerged was a teaching he rarely shared publicly during his lifetime, perhaps because it challenged too many cultural assumptions about honoring the dead and processing grief. But in his private files, carefully preserved now in the ARE archives, the teaching exists in complete detail. 9 specific behaviors that bind the living and the dead in patterns of mutual suffering. 9 things that love makes us do, but that love itself asks us to stop doing, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. Before we can understand what harms the dead, we must understand what they're trying to accomplish after they die. Cayce's Cosmology of the Afterlife provides the essential framework for everything that follows. According to thousands of his readings on death and the afterlife, the moment of physical death initiates a specific sequence, a journey with natural stages like a river that must flow from mountain to sea. First, the soul loosens from the physical body. The silver cord that connected consciousness to form during life begins to dissolve. This process can take moments or days depending on the suddenness of death and the soul's readiness to release. Then comes what Cayce called the Great Silence, a period of rest and integration where the soul absorbs the full experience of the life just lived. In this silence, there is no judgment from external sources, only a gentle review guided by higher aspects of the self. During this review, the soul experiences every moment of the life from multiple perspectives, not just their own experience, but the felt experience of everyone they affected. Every kindness ripples outward and is felt as blessing. Every cruelty ripples outward and is felt as wound. This is not punishment, it is education, the soul learning the full consequences of choices made in density and limitation. After the Great Silence comes a choice point. Some souls choose rest, moving into what Cayce described as peaceful sleep in higher dimensions. Some choose learning, moving toward what he called halls of wisdom, where spiritual knowledge becomes directly accessible. Some choose service, becoming guides and helpers for other souls still incarnating. And some, having completed what they came to learn, choose reincarnation to continue their evolution in physical form. But here is the crucial understanding. This entire sequence requires forward movement. The soul is meant to progress through these stages, each one releasing a little more attachment to physical existence, each one expanding consciousness into higher dimensions, each step taking them further from the earthly plane and deeper into the realms of light. When the living engage in certain behaviors, which we will detail one by one, they create what Cayce called energetic anchors. These aren't malicious, they're not curses, they're usually pure expressions of love, devotion, and unresolved grief. But they function like invisible tethers, connecting the departed soul back to the physical plane at the exact moment when that soul is trying to move forward into its own healing and evolution. Imagine you're walking along a path toward a beautiful destination you can see in the distance. The light is calling you forward. Peace awaits. But behind you, someone you deeply love is holding onto your clothing, crying, begging you not to leave. You can still move forward. The path is still there, but every step becomes exhausting. You're constantly torn between honoring your own journey and comforting the person who cannot let you go. You're divided, fragmented, unable to fully arrive in either place. This is what many departed souls experience when the living cannot release them properly. And the behaviors that create these anchors are often the exact behaviors our culture teaches us demonstrate love and honor for the dead. We've been taught wrong, not because our ancestors were cruel or ignorant, but because they didn't have access to the information that Edgar Cayce brought back from his journeys into the borderland between worlds. Now we do. And with that knowledge comes responsibility, the responsibility to grieve in ways that free both the living and the dead. The first behavior that deceased souls consistently asked people to stop, visiting their graves too frequently, daily visits multiple times per week, sitting for hours at the gravesite, weeping, talking to the stone as if the person could hear. This surprises most people. We've been taught that regular grave visits demonstrate love, faithfulness, devotion to the memory of those we've lost. But Cayce's readings from the dead themselves reveal a different truth. In one documented case from the ARE archives, a widow had been visiting her husband's grave every single morning for 2 years. She would arrive at dawn, sit on the ground beside his headstone, and cry for an hour before going to work. She thought she was honoring him. She thought her faithfulness proved her love. When Cayce gave her a reading at her sister's insistence, her deceased husband's soul appeared in the trance state with a message that shook her. Tell her I'm not there. Tell her she's calling me back from where I need to be. Tell her every morning when she comes, I feel pulled toward that place of grief, and it's preventing me from completing my transition. Why does excessive grave visitation create this problem? Cayce explained it through the mechanics of energy and attention. When someone visits a grave in deep grief, emanating waves of sorrow, guilt, longing, or desperation, they create what he called an energetic beacon, a signal that broadcasts across dimensions. The departed soul, especially in the first months or years after death, when they're still adjusting to non-physical existence, can perceive these emanations clearly. And when they do, they feel torn. They want to comfort you. They want to reach across the veil and whisper, I'm okay. Don't cry for me. I'm more alive now than I ever was in that limited form. But they cannot reach you in the way you're hoping. The density of grief creates a barrier that even the clearest soul communication cannot fully penetrate. So the cycle continues. You visit in pain. They respond with concern, diverting energy from their own evolution to try to soothe you. Neither of you moves forward. Cayce was very clear in his guidance. He wasn't saying, never visit graves. Occasional visits done with peaceful remembrance rather than desperate longing don't create the same energetic anchor. In fact, they can be beautiful. Brief moments of connection, gratitude, celebration of a life lived. It's the frequency and emotional intensity that matter. If you're visiting every day, if you're sitting at the grave weeping and begging them to come back, if you're making the gravesite a shrine of your inability to continue living, stop. Not because they don't love you, but because they do. They need you to release them from the burden of your grief so they can rest, so they can heal, so they can move into the next stage of their eternal journey. And you need to release them so you can heal, so you can continue your own life with presence and purpose rather than dwelling in the past. The healthiest grave visits, according to the souls who spoke through Cayce, are brief, infrequent, and carried out in a spirit of celebration rather than mourning. You come to say, I remember you, I honor what we shared, and I'm continuing my life with the gifts you gave me. That kind of visit doesn't bind. It blesses both of you. Learn the difference. Your grief is sacred, but it should not become a prison for either the living or the dead. The second thing, the dead consistently express discomfort about having their cremated remains kept in the home of the living, particularly displayed prominently, on mantels, on shelves, in living rooms where daily life unfolds around the constant physical reminder of death. Cayce documented numerous cases where deceased souls specifically requested that their ashes be scattered, buried, or at minimum removed from the daily living space of those they loved. One case from 1943 stands out in the archives. A man whose wife had been cremated kept her ashes in an ornate urn in their bedroom. He would talk to the urn every night before sleeping, sometimes for hours, telling her about his day, asking her for guidance, begging her to give him a sign she was still present. During a reading, her soul appeared with a message that brought him to tears. Tell him I'm not in that urn. Tell him that every night when he speaks to the ashes, I feel called back to a body that no longer exists. Tell him I need to dissolve back into the elements so I can fully embrace what I've become. Why does keeping ashes create this binding? Cayce explained that cremated remains, though no longer a living body, still carry an energetic signature of the person who inhabited that physical form. It's not the soul itself. The soul has departed. The consciousness has moved into other dimensions, but it's like an echo, a vibrational imprint, a resonance of what was. When these remains are kept in the home, particularly in spaces where you spend significant time, they create a constant low-level energetic presence that serves two problematic functions. First, they anchor your grief to a physical object. Every time you see the urn, you're reminded not of the person's life, but of their death. The ashes become a focal point for sorrow, and that sorrow, emanating day after day, reaches the departed soul like a persistent signal they cannot fully ignore. They perceive your pain, associated directly with the remnant of their physical form, and it troubles them deeply. They want to be remembered as they were in life, vibrant, dynamic, laughing, creating, living, not as ash in a container. Second, and perhaps more significantly, Cayce said the energetic imprint in the ashes can function as what he called a homing beacon for the soul. Even if the soul has moved well into its afterlife journey, successfully completing the great silence and beginning to explore higher dimensions, the presence of cremated remains in your home can create a subtle pullback toward physical plane awareness. It's not strong enough to actually retrieve them, but it's enough to create disturbance, like spiritual static interference in a beautiful song they're finally learning to hear clearly. Cayce wasn't absolutist about this teaching. He acknowledged cultural and personal reasons why people keep ashes, and he said that brief keeping, months, perhaps a year, while you adjust to the shock of loss is understandable. But permanent keeping, especially prominent display, deeply concerned the souls he communicated with. They wanted their ashes released to nature, scattered in places that held meaning, buried in earth where roots could take them up and transform them into new life, given to water where currents could dissolve and distribute them back into the great cycle. They wanted their physical remnant to complete its journey, to dissolve back into the elements, to finish what death began. If you're keeping someone's ashes because you fear that scattering them means losing them forever, hear this truth that Cayce brought back from the other side. They are already gone from that ash. Keeping it doesn't keep them closer to you. It keeps you bound to the moment of their death and them bound to a form they no longer need. Releasing the ashes frees you both, and that freedom, that willingness to let the physical completely dissolve, is one of the greatest gifts of love you can offer. The third behavior that troubled departed souls in Cayce's readings: when the living allow grief to become their primary identity, when loss becomes who you are rather than something you're experiencing. I'm a widow. I'm a bereaved mother. I'm the one whose son died. I'm the friend who survived when she didn't. When that becomes the center of your self-definition, when it's the first thing you mention about yourself, when it colors every interaction and decision, the dead worry. In a case from 1940, a mother who had lost her daughter came to Cayce not for contact with her child, but for guidance on her own health. She was experiencing chronic fatigue, depression, weight loss. During the reading, her daughter's soul appeared unbidden with a message. Tell my mother she's dying with me. Tell her I'm not dead, but she is. Tell her I need her to remember she's still alive. This identity fusion with grief creates suffering for both the living and the dead. For the living, it freezes you in the moment of loss. You stop growing, you stop evolving. Your life becomes a memorial rather than a continuation. Every choice filtered through the lens of the person's absence. Every opportunity evaluated by whether it dishonors their memory. Every moment of joy immediately followed by guilt that you dared to feel anything but sorrow. You're not living, you're haunting your own life. And from the other side, the departed soul watches this with profound sadness. They see you sacrificing your remaining years to honor their memory, and they don't want that sacrifice. Cayce documented case after case of deceased souls explicitly expressing variations of the same plea. My death was not meant to end your story. You're acting like you died too. Please remember you're still alive. The souls understand something the grieving often forget. The best way to honor someone who has died is not to stop living. It's to live more fully, more consciously, more lovingly, to take the lessons they taught you, the love they gave you, the wisdom you gained from knowing them, and let those gifts enrich your continued journey. When grief becomes identity, you're essentially saying, the most important thing about me is that you're gone. But the dead want you to say, you were important to me. And because of what we shared, I'm going to live with more purpose, more gratitude, more awareness of how precious and temporary this physical experience really is. Can you feel the difference? One makes them the permanent center of your existence. The other makes their influence a catalyst for your own continued growth. Cayce emphasized in his readings that this teaching doesn't mean you stop missing them. Grief doesn't have an expiration date. The ache of absence may never fully disappear, but grief can become one part of your experience rather than the totality of who you are. You can be someone who grieves and someone who laughs, someone who honors the dead and someone who celebrates being alive, someone who carries loss and someone who remains open to love. The dead don't want to be the reason you stopped being yourself. They want to be the reason you became even more yourself, deeper, wiser, more compassionate, because you understand now how fragile and precious life is. If you've been introducing yourself through your loss, if you've built your entire social identity around being the one who lost someone, pause and consider this question. Is this truly honoring them, or is this trapping both of you in a moment that neither of you can change? They've moved forward into their journey. They need you to move forward into yours, not forgetting them, but carrying them differently, as inspiration rather than as weight. The fourth thing, performing elaborate anniversary rituals, memorial services, or commemorative acts driven not by genuine loving remembrance, but by guilt. The fear that if you don't do them, you'll prove you didn't love them enough. The terror that if you miss an anniversary, you're dishonoring their memory. The belief that love must be demonstrated through suffering and elaborate performance. Cayce's readings revealed something that surprises most people. Souls can distinguish between rituals done from love and rituals done from obligation or guilt, and they respond very differently to each. In one documented case from 1938, a man had been hosting an elaborate anniversary dinner every year on the date his father died. 30 people, formal attire, speeches about the father's life, hours of somber remembrance. The man hated it. It exhausted him. It drained his finances. But he was terrified that if he stopped, his siblings would judge him and his father would be dishonored. During a reading, his father's soul appeared with a simple message. Tell my son he can stop. Tell him I don't need the performances. Tell him I'd rather he think of me once with genuine warmth than perform for me 100 times out of duty. This teaching illuminates something profound about energy and intention. When you light a candle on someone's birthday from a place of warm remembrance, thinking of happy times you shared, feeling gratitude for having known them, the departed soul perceives that frequency. They feel the warmth, the love, and it brings them joy. But when you force yourself through an elaborate memorial dinner because you feel you'll be a bad daughter if you don't, when you're going through motions driven by guilt or social expectation rather than genuine feeling, they feel that frequency too, and it troubles them because they don't want to be the source of your guilt. They don't want you performing exhausting rituals to prove your love. They already know you loved them. If they didn't know in life, they know now. The life review showed them every moment of genuine love. Every act of care, every sacrifice you made. Your love doesn't need more proof. What they want, according to Cayce's consistent documentation, is for you to remember them naturally, spontaneously, with ease rather than effort. You're cooking and you think, Dad would have loved this dish. You hear a song and you smile because it reminds you of dancing together. You make a choice and you pause, considering what they would have advised, letting their wisdom inform your decision. This ongoing, natural presence in your thoughts and life, this integration rather than ritualistic separation, honors them far more than forced annual performances. Cayce gave specific guidance about memorial rituals that remains relevant today. If the ritual feels joyful, if it feels celebratory, if it feels genuinely connecting, do it. If it feels heavy, if it feels obligatory, if it's rooted in fear of judgment from the living or the dead, stop it. The dead don't need your performances. They need your peace. Here is permission you may have been waiting years to receive. You don't have to visit the grave on their birthday if it fills you with dread. You don't have to host the annual memorial dinner if it exhausts you. You don't have to keep traditions that have transformed from blessings into burdens. They understand. They see your heart. They know your love. And what they want most is for you to honor them in ways that feel life-giving, not life-draining. Love doesn't require proof through suffering, and remembrance doesn't require performance. If this teaching stirs something in you, if you've been trapped in guilt-driven rituals, take a moment right now. Close your eyes. Imagine the person you've lost, and hear them say to you, I release you from the obligation to prove your love. I already know. Now honor me by living joyfully. That's what they want. That's the ritual that serves everyone. The fifth behavior, constantly asking, demanding, or desperately pleading for the dead to send you signs that they're okay. This is perhaps the most misunderstood teaching in all of Cayce's after-death communications. Because signs do happen, souls can and do sometimes reach across the veil, the butterfly that appears at the perfect moment, the song that plays exactly when you need to hear it, the dream visit that feels more real than waking life. These genuine contacts are gifts, moments of grace where the veil thins and connection becomes briefly possible. But Cayce's readings revealed a painful truth. The relentless pressure from the living to prove their presence creates a burden the dead struggle to bear. In a case from 1942, a woman who had lost her sister came to Cayce desperate for communication. She had been begging for signs daily, watching for synchronicities, interpreting every coincidence as potential contact, never satisfied, always needing more proof. During the reading, her sister's soul appeared exhausted. The message delivered through Cayce's trance voice was heartbreaking. "Tell her I'm trying, but she doesn't understand how much energy it takes. Tell her every time I reach toward her, I have to descend from the peace I've found. Tell her I can't keep doing this. I need to rest." Why does demanding signs create this problem? Cayce explained that after death, souls naturally rise in vibration. They move into higher frequency dimensions, where love is the native language and density is released. Sending signs, manifesting in physical reality, influencing electronics, appearing clearly in dreams, requires them to lower their vibration dramatically, to descend back toward physical plane frequency, to become denser than they naturally are in their evolved state. It's possible, but it's costly. When done voluntarily, as a spontaneous gift of love, when they sense you truly need reassurance, it's one thing. But when the living are constantly begging for signs, never satisfied with the ones already given, always demanding more proof, the soul feels trapped between two needs: their own need to rest, heal, and evolve in the higher dimensions, and the living person's need for reassurance that won't be satisfied by any amount of evidence. Many souls, Cayce said, will attempt to send signs in the early weeks and months after death out of compassion for the grieving. But when the living person demands more signs, then more, when no amount of contact is ever enough, the soul eventually must make a painful choice. Keep depleting themselves trying to meet impossible emotional needs, or withdraw to preserve their own evolution and trust that the living person will eventually find peace without constant external validation. Most souls, with great reluctance, choose withdrawal, and then the living person interprets the absence of signs as abandonment, as proof they're truly gone, as evidence they didn't love enough to stay in contact. It's a tragic misunderstanding. Here is what Cayce recommended instead of asking for signs. Assume they're okay. Trust that the universe, in its infinite intelligence and compassion, has systems in place to care for departed souls. Systems far more sophisticated and loving than our limited earthly understanding can comprehend. Know that if they could easily send you a sign without cost to themselves, they would. And if they're not sending signs, it's not because they don't love you. It's because they're resting, or healing, or learning, or busy with their own evolution in ways your physical senses cannot perceive. Release them from the obligation to prove their existence or their peace to you. Your job isn't to extract evidence from them. Your job is to trust what you cannot see, to have faith in their continuation even without proof, to live your life with the assumption that they want you to be happy. If a sign comes spontaneously, if a butterfly lands on your hand at the precise moment you're thinking of them, if their favorite song plays when you need comfort, if you wake from a dream visit with absolute certainty of contact, receive it with gratitude. But stop demanding, stop begging, stop making your peace conditional on their performance. Let them rest. They've earned it. And you, dear soul, deserve to find peace not in signs from the dead, but in trust in the larger mystery that holds both the living and the departed in eternal love. If you've been watching this teaching and feeling seen, if something about these messages is landing in your heart, do something for me right now. Take a breath and say, either aloud or silently, I release you from the burden of proving you're okay. I'm choosing to trust, and I promise to find my own peace. That's the gift they're waiting for, your permission for them to rest. The sixth thing the dead wish you'd stop, freezing their physical space exactly as it was when they died. their room untouched, their belongings in place, their clothes still hanging in the closet, their bed made as if they might return tonight. This preservation of space, this refusal to acknowledge that death occurred, troubles the departed more than almost anything else. In a case from 1939, a mother had kept her teenage son's room exactly as it was for 3 years. Every poster on the wall, every book on the shelf, his football trophies, his unwashed laundry still in the hamper. She would spend hours in that room, sitting on his bed, inhaling his scent, talking to him as if he were still 15. During a reading, her son's soul appeared with desperation. Tell her I'm not in that room. Tell her I'm growing, changing, evolving. Tell her when she sits there pretending I'm still 15, she's refusing to acknowledge who I'm becoming now. Why does preserving space create binding? Cayce explained that keeping a deceased person's space frozen in time creates what he called a temporal trap, a physical location that energetically refuses to acknowledge that time has moved forward and life has changed. When the living spend time in that frozen space, particularly in states of intense grief or longing, they're essentially attempting to hold reality in the past, to create a pocket where the person isn't dead, just absent temporarily. The departed soul perceives this. They see you sitting in their room, surrounded by their belongings, pretending nothing has changed. And they want to tell you, I'm not there anymore. That room doesn't hold me. You're clinging to an echo while I'm becoming something new. Cayce wasn't suggesting immediate erasure. The healthy approach, he said, is gradual integration. In the first weeks or months after death, it's completely natural to leave things unchanged while you process shock and adjust to the absence. But at some point, usually within a year, though there's no rigid timeline, the living must begin the ritual of releasing physical objects, repurposing space, and allowing life to continue evolving. This isn't dishonoring their memory, it's honoring reality. They lived, they died, life continues. Your space should reflect that truth. Cayce gave specific guidance about this process. Keep items that bring you genuine joy. The sweater that still smells like them, the book they loved, the photograph that captures their essence. Release items you're keeping out of guilt or magical thinking. You're not keeping them alive by preserving their possessions. You're just filling your home with ghosts. If you're holding on to their clothes because you fear forgetting what they looked like, you're not trusting your own memory and you're not honoring the photographs you have. If you're keeping their room as a shrine because you fear they'll be angry if you change it, you're projecting your own fear onto them. They don't care about stuff. They care about your well-being. One of the most powerful messages Cayce documented came through in a 1941 reading. A deceased woman speaking to her sister who had maintained a shrine in her home. Tell her I'm not in that room. I'm free. Truly free for the first time. I want her to be free too, free from the past, free from preservation, free to continue her life. The room is just a room now. Let it be useful again. If you've been maintaining a shrine, pause and ask yourself honestly, are you doing this for them? Or are you doing it because releasing their belongings feels like releasing them? They're already released. Their essence isn't stored in objects. It's stored in your heart, your memories, the ways they changed you. Free yourself. The dead are cheering for your liberation. The seventh behavior, and one of the most spiritually significant, harboring unforgiveness towards someone who has died. Holding on to anger, resentment, bitterness about what they did or didn't do, what they said or never said, how they hurt you, how they failed you, how things ended between you. Cayce's readings revealed that unforgiveness from the living creates profound energetic entanglement that affects both the deceased soul and the person refusing to forgive, sometimes across lifetimes. In a documented case from 1940, a man came to Cayce with chronic health issues that no doctor could diagnose. During the reading, Cayce traced the root cause to unresolved anger toward his father, who had died 5 years earlier. The father's soul appeared in the reading with a message. "Tell my son I see his anger. I feel it like chains connecting us. Tell him I'm already facing what I did wrong. He doesn't need to punish me. His unforgiveness is punishing both of us." Why does unforgiveness bind so powerfully? Cayce explained that unresolved emotional contracts don't dissolve at death. They persist energetically until consciously released by the person still holding them. When someone dies and you're still carrying anger about what they did or didn't do, that anger functions as a cord, an energetic tether connecting your field to theirs. From their side, even if they've successfully transitioned and moved into higher dimensions, they feel this cord as weight, as unfinished business that pulls at their awareness. Many souls, Cayce said, cannot fully rest or move forward in their evolution while someone they harmed in life is still bound to them through unforgiveness. But here is the profound twist that Cayce emphasized again and again. The unforgiveness harms you more than it harms them. They're in a dimension now where truth is visible, where their own failings, limitations, and harmful actions are already fully known to them. Most departed souls have experienced the life review. They've felt the full impact of their actions. They've experienced the pain they caused others as if it were their own pain. They've already faced what they did. They already know. They're already processing their karma. Your continued anger doesn't teach them anything. It doesn't make them more accountable. It doesn't create justice. It only keeps you trapped in the past, carrying poison, letting their actions continue harming you long after they're gone. Cayce was extraordinarily clear about what forgiveness is and isn't. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning what they did. It doesn't mean pretending the harm didn't matter. It doesn't mean you have to feel warm feelings toward them or wish you could have more time together. Forgiveness simply means, I release the energetic contract between us. I acknowledge that you harmed me, and I choose to no longer carry that harm as an active wound. What you did was your karma to work through. How I respond now is mine. The practice Cayce recommended: sit quietly.